Livability Podcast Network. My name is Emily Gilmer, and I'm a podcast engineer here. Uh, and it's very excited to bring you another episode of the Aspie Bridge Show. The Suzanne Plumley. Uh, so we're here every Tuesday at 11 a.m. Central. So and pass over to Suzanne.
All right. Thank you, Emily. And I'm so excited about this awesome meeting today. We do have Wendy with us today, which is wonderful. There's a big thing. Wendy's like, thank you so much for giving me grace. And I'm like, well, that's part of life now. If you can't extend grace to another person for a human mistake, then it's going to be a long life. Because Or when you make a mistake and someone doesn't give you grace and you say, well, it's just a mistake. I
Yeah.
think you really need to come to understand that everyone deserves grace. And why
Yes.
not? I mean, that's
And I
what
appreciate that
humanity.
about you. And thank you.
You're welcome. Oh, I'm so happy to have you here today.
Good to be here.
Let's go into our usual start with all the wonderful people out there on the internet, especially on YouTube, such as Paul Micallef on Asperger's on the Inside, and Sam Stein in Netherlands. And then we have Sarah Hendricks in the UK and Temple Grandin here in the US, as well as other Aspie women and men that are here to tell you about what autism is. I really decided that I wanted to go a different route. And with the Aspie Bridge, although you don't see it behind me, I'm kind of at my home per se. With all the wonderful Aspie people out there, the Aspie Bridge is more to provide you with different people who can offer you valuable information and resources to help you realize that going back into society doesn't have to be a anxiety ridden idea. It doesn't have to get you all excited if you know that people like Wendy are here and all the other guests I've had are here to help you. And I have a program that I've started called Aspie Bridge Builders, where I bring in people like Wendy and Jennifer and some of the other guests, Linda, that I've had, to offer you these people who will help you with information. And by contacting me at sgp.enrichinglifestyles.com or Suzanne at the AspieBridgeShow.com, you can let me know when you want to have questions to each of these wonderful people that are here to help you. But in the meantime, come back to the YouTube channel, subscribe to it, and then let us know right there that you have a question, and I can make sure you get the answers you need. So last week on the Aspie Bridge, I came up with some of the different beliefs of what I thought was readiness to decide whether or not you are ready to leave your parental home, leave a group home, or leave even a place that might have some job coaches and life coaches to live independently. Because now, if you've gone into society and you've gotten a job and you just need that extra personal space that you might not have at some of these other locations, Wendy will help you decide whether or not you are or are not ready based on a list of different ideas that she has researched and come up with. So, Wendy, thank you so much for coming today. I really love seeing you again. And I know I'm going to have you for one more time, but this is the next segment of where your specialty is. Can you tell us how you've come to really research this independent living readiness?
Well, thank you, Suzanne. It's lovely to be here. Um, I had been a special ed teacher for 20 years, a educational psychologist for another 20 years, and specializing in autism, even before I realized that my late husband and two of our three children, were autistic, all late diagnosed. So when I took retirement, after my husband died, uh, I started writing books for Future Horizons publisher. And the one that I'm going to be talking about now is a a sort of I guess it's a revision, the updated version of the first in a series of 5 books called Adulting While Autistic. And it includes this first one, which is Independent Living While Autistic, and also Dating While Autistic, Relating While Autistic, since I have been in a very happy marriage with an autistic man, Parenting While Autistic. I was fortunate to co-parent with an autistic dad. And the one I'm writing right now is Working While Autistic, because employment is a big thing. But today we're talking about independence. And one of the big hallmarks of independence is leaving the nest, going out on your own. That can happen at different times for different people. And there is no right or wrong time.
Mm-mm.
Everybody needs to go at their own speed, at their own comfort level. For some people, they turn 18, they graduate from high school, they want to leave home. They're not happy living with their parents. They really want their independence. And that is their desire. Other people might live with their parents until their parents maybe pass away or maybe move into a retirement village or something. There are some people who have already made the transition into a group home, but they realize they're really ready for even more independence and they want to transition to their own apartment. Some people have gone from living with their parents to living with a spouse or a romantic partner or a roommate.
That's
And
where I was. Yeah, I went from my house up to college for 4 years and ended up meeting my spouse in college,
uh-huh.
and then went from there into living in an apartment close by. But then when he had to move locations for his job, we ended up just sharing a place. So yeah, I
Uh-huh.
really spent maybe all of maybe 6 months living independently. I
Mhm.
mean, completely independently.
And it's for each person's journey is unique to them, and that's fine. But some people, once they have moved in with a spouse or partner, there still might come a time when their partner dies. My husband was 54 when he had his heart attack, so that was unexpected. Or sometimes there's a breakup or a divorce. But
That's
at
what
whatever period, yeah, and it's hard. At whatever period in your life that you're looking at, okay, it's time to get independent. There are some things to look at. And today I'm going to talk about financial readiness, social emotional readiness, and the pros and cons of living alone versus living with other people. So let's and there's a checklist that I sent to Suzanne. Um, but I'm just going to talk about some of these points briefly. But the first obvious one is, do you have enough regular income to pay rent? Clearly, if you can't afford to pay rent, then you can't afford to move out yet. But you also need to think about utilities, electricity, gas, water, sewage, and I think obviously food. And when you go to the grocery store for food, you don't always think about things like toilet paper, soap, shampoo. When money is short, there's only so long you can keep putting water into the shampoo bottle and swishing it around and hoping to get your hair clean with it, because these things are expensive. And although it might seem like a luxury, things like internet, phone, streaming service are really, for most of us, those are kind of a requirement. We need that connection to the outside world. We need entertainment. TV
Yes.
is not free anymore.
I have found that for me, for my expenses and when I was cutting down, while I am not as big on television, the internet is my lifeline. And
Yes.
that was non-negotiable. TV, I found ways around it with Roku and streaming.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
but yeah, you really have to take some of these different extras into consideration.
That's right. And also, you have to ask yourself, is your income steady or is it fluctuating? Some kinds of jobs, you get the exact same paycheck every month or every 2 weeks. But then there are others where you might get more hours, you might get fewer hours. Or if you're a freelancer, you might sell a story or a product or whatever it is, and then you might not sell. So you have to think, how steady is my income? And if you have savings for potential emergencies, because emergencies will come up. Now, if you're renting, then some emergencies, like the plumber, the landlord is going to cover that. So even though people say, oh, well, you should try to buy a house, it's not easy to buy a house. It takes a lot of money. But if you are in a position where you can buy a house or inherit a house, then you are responsible for all those things. So make sure that if the roof leaks, you have some way to handle those potential emergencies. But financial isn't the only kind of readiness. There's also social emotional readiness. If you've lived with family, will you miss them? Do you have a plan to keep in touch with them? A lot of people I know, a lot of autistic people I know, don't always have in the front of their mind people that are not there with them. And you get distracted, your life is going on, and suddenly you realize, wow, I haven't talked to my sister in 2 weeks. I wonder how she's doing. So if you have a plan to keep in touch with the people who are important to you, put it in your calendar. That doesn't mean it doesn't come from your heart. That just means you care enough to plan to reach out to people in whatever way is comfortable for you. Not everybody likes to talk on the phone. A lot of people don't like to talk on the phone, but texting might be fine. Emailing might be fine. Maybe even a Zoom thing where you can see the other person. And of course, if you live close enough to see each other in person, that's always, that can be fun. Just choose a place that's not like a sensory or social overwhelming environment, but where you can feel comfortable connecting with those people that matter to you. So even if you're not living with them.
Yeah, I tend to find that of my preference, I prefer to do Zoom, and because then I can go back and review what was said. And make any corrections if I have misspoke in any way, and you can't do that on the telephone.
No.
Or even more than that, I like to write either emails or texting, because then there's a way that I can go back and rewrite before I hit that send button. And that just softens up our language. Sometimes we can be a little bit blunt. And sometimes we need to just soften up the language. Like I remember saying, oh, I forgot to say hello at the beginning of that text. Some people just like that versus, so are you coming on Thursday or not? I mean, that's
very good point.
That can be a little bit harsh to someone. But if we can say, hello, how's your day? And then go into the communication, that's an important part of knowing that someone else, you care about other people.
It's so important. And you can also check for autocorrect in case you type one thing and your computer thinks you meant something similar but not right. Mm-hmm. A lot of people, when they're sending an email, they don't even write who it's to until they're all done checking it. So that, because I know for me, I can accidentally, my finger will touch the wrong place and suddenly it's sent. And I wasn't ready for that. So if I wait till the end to put the person it's going to, then, like you said, there's time to reread it and think about how the other person might receive it. Is it going to sound blunt? Is it going to sound like I care about you? So that's a good point, Suzanne. Thanks. And another thing about social emotional readiness is, are you prepared to be fully responsible for yourself without burning out? There's a lot that has to be done. And if doing everything burns you out, then maybe you're not ready. I know a lot of people have a strong emotional attachment to a pet. I mean, a pet can be such an integral part of our self-care. If you have been living with your parents and you have been a pet owner, which means that, you've been cleaning up after them and taking care of, feeding them and watering them. But when you have a hard day at work or when you're overwhelmed, if your parent steps in and helps take care of your pet, then you have to think, I'm the only one that can do this if I'm living alone. Mm-hmm. How often, you might want to check before you move out. How often do my parents or housemates step in and help me out with which things? Am I only changing the litter box once a week, but somebody else is changing it 2 more times during the week. These are just things to think about. And then to have a plan.
Absolutely. And if you have a space where you're letting your animals out, you got to remember you got to let them back in again. I mean, it's
Yeah,
your
that's
fur
right.
babies require the same care sometimes
Yes.
as your actual human babies. So if you're in a space where you let them out, are you going to remember what is your technology? I mean, some other people will be like,
Mhm.
oh, your cat was at the door, so I let them in. But if you're independently,
Yeah.
you got to remember these things.
Yeah, you just have to evaluate how much have you been co-parenting your fur baby as opposed to truly parenting. And sometimes the other people you live with will have just been stepping in, doing little things for you, and you might not be aware of how much they've been helping you. But when you're getting ready to move out, start looking at that. Start keeping track and ask them, are you guys, helping me a lot with this or with that? And find out what you can take on for yourself. And then to have a plan, and I mean a written plan for what to do if you become lonely or depressed or you're burned out. Because when you are feeling like that, you won't be able to automatically think of solutions. But when you are not lonely, depressed, or burned out, you can make a list and say, what helps me when I'm depressed? Exercise, watching my favorite thing on TV, whatever it is, just make a list. And then when you are feeling depressed, you'll find, have the list or maybe a box of things that make you feel better, things that you love, things that are sensory fulfilling. And to just have that little emergency box so that when you are feeling down, you can help yourself to feel better.
Yes, yes. So don't mind me. Sorry, keep
Oh,
going.
that's
I
okay.
was
Okay.
going to pull something.
Now, the two things to think about when you move out, besides the financial and social emotional responsibility and readiness, I mean,
One thing I was going to say,
uh-huh,
and excuse my craziness,
that's okay. Yeah.
sometimes if you put into a jar all your favorite activities,
Oh,
and then it's kind of like a surprise, and
yeah.
it might be go take a walk to the park, and then
Just pull one
you're
out.
not having to come up with these ideas when you're feeling burned out. Just go into your little jar and say, oh, I think I'll go get ice cream today or something. But that might be
Yeah.
something that helps you really be spontaneous, because we can get even more into a plan sometimes, and then if it doesn't work out, we're just as, oh, well, I was planning on doing, let's just say you want to watch a movie and for some reason the electricity is out because you're having a winter storm. Well,
Hmm.
go into your bucket and find something else. Do a
Yeah. Like a,
puzzle.
a plan B bucket. When all else fails, pull a little card or whatever it is and do the thing. Yeah, that's a great idea. So one of the things that you have to decide is, are you going to live alone or are you going to live with housemates or roommates? And there's a lot to think about in both of those. If you choose to live alone, that means you are completely responsible for all the finances. You are the only one paying rent. You don't get to split rent with somebody else. And you also are fully responsible for all of the housework tasks. There's
Yes.
nobody else to help out with the stuff. If you don't have any clean dishes, nobody else is going to come in and wash them for you.
I
Um,
have currently brought in someone who will even come in and just pay my utilities for me. And that's been
nice.
a godsend, because that means that while I'm paying rent, some of the extra stuff I don't have to worry about now. And
Yes.
that's been nice. And at the same time, as you say, sometimes I do get tired of cooking. And
Yeah.
the other person has made a meal, and then we'll go back and forth, and sometimes she's tired of making a meal and I have one all prepared. So it's really nice to be able to sit down with a roommate sometimes and
Yeah.
just enjoy conversation.
That's
So
right. But
be
when
very
you
careful, very careful. And I want to say this, I've run into some challenges, and we ask you women have our set ways.
Of course.
And this is where Wendy and I were talking about grace earlier. You really have to decide what are your non negotiables. And I think I talked about this last week. What are your non negotiables? And what
Yeah.
are your flexibles? Like, for instance, one thing that we ran into is she likes a completely quiet room for movie watching. I
Mhm.
like to discuss the movies.
Ah,
So you need to come up with some of these things. I consider cleanliness to be organized, everything put away, covers on bottles, things put away. Her cleanliness is more in using all natural products.
mhm.
So even what is the definition of cleanliness? What is the definition of your responsibilities versus my responsibilities? Is it shared responsibilities? Because sometimes we can both say, I'm too tired to do that now, and then nobody gets it done. So you got
Yeah,
to really have a plan ahead. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but you got to be able to communicate with the other person. That's very
definitely.
important.
It is. It is so important. Um, and also, if you do choose to live alone, are you prepared for the social isolation? Some people love that. They crave not having all the noise and everything that comes along with other people. Other people might get lonely. So, do you have a plan for who you would reach out to if you do feel lonely? Um, Make sure you run it by them and and that is someone, whether it's a family member or a longtime friend, that they say, yes, I am your go-to person. If you are lonely, you can text me, you can call me, you can email me. Don't
In my
just,
organization, we call that partners in believing. And
oh,
that can
partners
be
in
good
believing.
for sharing an idea, sharing a dream, or maybe sometimes just letting some frustration off your shoulders. So call it a partner in believing.
When your partner in believing has agreed to be there for you, it's not just like somebody you work with. You're not going to
No,
call that person when you're lonely, because that's not a partner in believing.
no.
But when you have that person that is there for you and you are there for them, that makes so much of a difference, because then you know who you can reach out to safely, and that it's a mutual partnership. You believe in
Mhm.
each other, you're there for each other.
Absolutely. I have, in fact, my partner in believing was here a couple of weeks on the show, and that was
Oh,
nice to have.
oh, that's lovely. And finally, if you do choose to live with housemates or roommates, you have to be prepared to compromise on some issues. You were talking about one person wants silence during the movies, the other person wants to chat. And the same can be true for things like music. One person might want to listen to their music and to not have any other noise while they're listening to it. The other person might like the TV on constantly. So things like headphones, so that you can each have your own music or sound without the other person having to, you
And
know,
volume.
and
Volume is
volume.
very important. And we all like our volume different ways. Even if you're living with an adult child, I would
Mhm.
come to my one of my daughters who does like the music louder, and I would say, "Here, I have an idea for you. If you want your music, I get to choose the volume.
Ah,
If you like loud music, then we listen to my music." So they get to
yeah.
decide whether volume is important or their own music is important, because sometimes wearing headphones all the time might become a challenge. So come up with that cute little idea.
Now, just last night, I was hanging out with my kids, and they had a TV show that I wasn't all that interested in, but I had an audio book that I wanted to listen to that book. So I put on my headset, but then I asked them because it sounds loud to me. So I paused it and I said, "Can you guys hear that?" Because my autistic son has really good hearing. You know how that is, super hearing. So I just checked. I said,
Yeah.
at this level, when it's supposed to be private, But I think we've all been out in public places where we see somebody with earphones and we can hear the not
Yeah.
not full loudness, but we can hear it. So
Check
I made
in. Check in, check in, check in. And
Can you feel
that's
this? Does this bother you? Yes.
exactly. And if you don't mind my saying, sometimes we ask people just need to check in on other issues. Am I violating your boundaries? Am I venting too much? I have one other friend where I talked to her about different challenges that we both know about. And
Yeah.
I had to check in the other day and I say, your friendship is too valuable to me to violate your boundary of how much emotional boundary. Let's put it that way, emotional boundary. Am I overstepping your emotional boundary if I vent often? And let them tell you when, well, I really one a week I can handle because
Mhm.
they have emotional boundaries too. It's not just
Y-
us.
Yes, definitely. That is so smart of you to just check in. Because the kind of friendship you were describing, it sounds like it's a two-way thing. Sometimes she can vent to you, sometimes you vent to her. And that kind of two-way relationship is so important.
Mhm.
And also communicating respectfully. Occasionally, and I know this is not you because you've already talked about when you email, you check it and make sure that it's respectful. But there are people who, when they are typing something, they might just shoot from here's what I think, especially if they don't know, if they're not thinking that's a human being on the other end of it. I had someone who took my online quiz that I have on my practice, and then emailed me and said, that quiz was kind of stupid and it was a waste of time, and I think your website is just like a total waste of time. I couldn't find what I wanted on it, and I'm the CEO, so I got that message. And I wrote back to her and I said, I'm so sorry that you thought that my quiz was a waste of your time. I certainly didn't intend it to be. I had fun writing it, but it's not for everybody. And
Mhm.
and and she wrote back to me and said, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean for it to sound that way." And she had not realized that she was talking to a human being and that she was being mean to someone she didn't know because it was just like typing on the internet. And then we were able to have a respectful communication between us. Um,
Mm.
but her initial thought was, I'm just going to say what I want. I feel like
Yeah.
I just wasted my time. And so I'm going to say it that way instead of saying, can I couldn't navigate to this place. Can you help me find, whatever it is? And I think that's something that we have to
Oh,
just be aware of when we're communicating.
so exactly. So often we pick up these little devices
Yes.
and we forget that someone's still receiving it. And at the same time, we know that there are bots out there. So
Yes.
not every message goes to a bot.
Yeah.
Not every message is cleared out if it's ill fated or ill spoken.
Yeah.
So even though we have our phones, you gotta treat as if someone's on the other side of that phone line.
That's right. A person with feelings. Yeah. Um, and of course, another thing about living with housemates or roommates is taking on 50% of the expenses and taking on 50% of the housework tasks. You can decide if you each make a list, if you make a list of all the housework tasks, and then everybody says, these I enjoy, these I hate, then you just have to, if there are some that everybody hates, then you have to take turns or rotate it so that nobody is stuck with always doing the thing that they hate. But when it's your turn to do the thing you hate, make sure you do it well. Don't just do it halfway so that the next person is stuck with extra work, because
Mm.
that's not being a respectful roommate.
No, it's
Um,
not. And you talk about doing the halfway, and it's like sometimes you may have your own finances figured out,
mhm.
but But sometimes it's nice to say, "Can I help you? Here's a couple of extra dollars. Can I help you to get the lawn mowed? Can I help you with gas money?" Because sometimes you're not going to take your own cars, and maybe one of you doesn't drive. But that doesn't mean that just because the other person is driving, that they should have to pay for all the gas. So just
That
be
is so good.
mindful that you just kind of stick a 20 in your pocket to say thank you. I appreciate you doing XYZ. And I mean, we're all going to fall into that. I'm a couple of dollars short. And wouldn't it be nice to know that if they gave you, you'd be willing to give back?
Yeah. And the idea of giving rides and paying for gas, that is so important. And sometimes people will say, when you first say, "Can I help pay for gas?" They'll say, "Oh, no, that's okay." But like you said, having a little something in your pocket, sometimes, and if they won't take the money, I mean, you might, if you offer a couple times, they might. If they won't take the money, then you figure out where they like to go, like if there's a favorite coffee place. But they may not be able to go there all the time because that's a splurge. And you give them a card for the place that you already know that they like.
Mm, good
Then that
plan.
shows you're thoughtful, that you're paying attention to them. You're not giving them a card for what you like, but for what they like. And
Yeah.
that's being a really thoughtful housemate.
Yes, it is.
Another thing about housemates is sometimes they are friends. They start out as friends. That's how they got together. And they enjoy doing everything together. But there are going to be times that they might not, that one person might go to a party that the other person wasn't invited to. And if you just became housemates because of the convenience of sharing expenses, you might never socialize. Just because they are going out and doing something fun, we can't expect that they're going to invite us to go along with them, because we may not be friends. We may just be housemates, and that's it. And it's important to not get your feelings hurt
Right.
if you don't get invited to everything.
In fact, it's kind of interesting. And my housemate will go to a senior center. Well, I'm not quite at the point where um,
Yeah.
I'm of age to go to a senior center yet. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I wish her well. I mean, that's where her network is.
Yeah.
This past Saturday, I went scrapbooking on my own. I mean, you
Yeah.
do have to have some private time in order for
Mhm.
the relationship to keep going smoothly. If you're going to do everything together all the time, that doesn't give you the emotional break that you need, especially now that you do live together. Is other than the bathroom, sometimes there's just no place to get away. So
Yeah.
you do need to have your own set of activities that you enjoy. Don't plan to do everything together. And that is a big thing. Do not
Yes.
plan to do everything together. Now, if you're going to the movies, you can say, "Hey, I'm going to the movies. You want to join me?" Or,
Yeah.
"I'm doing this. Would you like to join me?" But if it's
Mhm.
specific, like I know that she doesn't scrapbook, so that would have been silly.
Yes.
But and I don't like to go. I don't need to go to a senior center. So,
Yeah.
and that's fine. And you really need to know that you're not going to do everything together.
That is so important. Now, before we say goodbye today, because I want to be respectful of your time, but I'd love to tell you a little bit about my book that just came out in April.
Yes, please
It,
do. Please
it's
do.
it's the revision of the first book in that series I talked about, adulting while autistic, and it's called Independent Living While Autistic: Your Roadmap to Success. And every chapter is about some aspect of independence.
Mhm.
Today we talked about moving out, but there's a lot of different things, money management, transportation. There's a lot. And for each chapter, after I, talk about the stuff about the topic, I have some fictional characters, 5 fictional characters that I've made up, ages 18 through like 62. And for each of those characters, I show how they addressed that issue or how it worked for them. Now,
Mhm.
you might be an 18-year-old, but Robert, who's 62, had a solution that you say, "Oh, that's more like me." Or you might be a 45-year-old, but you don't relate to Maria, who's 45. You really relate to Zach, who's 33. Whatever it is, you might find something useful in one of these 5 characters. So I have a little story about how it works for them throughout the book. Every chapter, there's 5 little stories at the end. But also, and I think more importantly, each chapter has something written by an actually autistic person.
Oh, wow.
Because I'm not autistic. I mean, I've certainly studied a lot. I've lived with people. I was in love with an autistic man for 27 years, but that doesn't make me autistic. And there are voices out there that's what we want to elevate and listen to. The autistic people or the Aspies, that's who knows and who understands. And so every chapter I have words of wisdom from the people who know better than I do. And
I'm
that's
definitely gonna have to get that book. That sounds exciting.
well, I hope people like it. And ask your library if I always think there are so many books out there that you might not want to devote not only the money but also the bookshelf space. There's only so many bookshelves you can put in a house.
Now
So-
that brings me to an interesting point. One of the things, I do love books, and I find that I have more books than I have time sometimes. Audible is a great way, and I have been enjoying Audible a lot, especially if you're going on the bus and you don't want to hear all the sounds around you, or if you are a driver and you want to hear something other than music and static as you go from town to town. Audible provides some of the best books that are out there. So I like that. Wendy, is that book on Audible or on
3 of my books are on Audible, and I never found out until they showed up because that's between my publisher and Audible. I don't get involved at that point. And so I'm thinking that this one they will also put on Audible, but I don't know yet. You could just search on Audible. If you search my name, Wendella Whitcomb Marsh, it will show you which of my books are on Audible.
I will have to do that. That's a wonderful idea because I've found recently that has become even more important to me than watching TV because I don't watch. I do a craft.
Yeah.
And so hearing a story is a lot better than watching a story sometimes.
I feel the same way. I love listening to audiobooks. My daughter has to remind me it's not books on tape anymore. It's audio books. It's like, thank you. Living in the past.
Yes, I have an opportunity to put mine onto Audible too. And so I just have to balance out the cost of that. But that would be really good too.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. So thanks for letting me share about that.
This is wonderful. And I do, as I say, have one more time. I would like you to come back about relationships toward the end of June. Would you be willing?
Yes, I would love to come back and talk about relating while autistic.
That would be great. I do have a couple, some good friends of mine who are going to talk as well. She works with her female clients on how to navigate herself through a relationship, but it might be nice to have the yin and yang, as I like to call it, of going back and forth. And as I say, when I have this friend, I actually have another male friend where the 3 of us got to know each other. But it would be nice to have it at the bookends on both sides of the month of June. So if you're available, I would love to have you toward the end of June.
I am available. And while I've got you here, the book I'm working on right now, Working While Autistic, I'm still seeking autistic voices, Aspie voices.
Wow.
So I would love it if you would, and I'll send you a free book when it comes out, if you'll give me just a little story. So with your permission, I will email you the form.
I would love that. I would love to be a part of that for you.
Thank you. I would love to have you in the book, have your words of wisdom in there.
Well, it just so happens I'm finishing year 5 of Starbucks. So that will be a very good time for me to wrap up my time at Starbucks as I go on to bigger ventures in my life coaching. So
yes, it's wonderful.
It's been wonderful office hours in my a non-movable coffee truck, as I like to call it, because I work at the drive-through window. So that's a hint on what my story will be about.
I can't wait. Thank you so much, Suzanne.
Thank you, Wendy. I so appreciate you coming today, and we'll get on the calendar for the end of June if that's good for you.
That sounds great. Thanks so much.
All
And
right.
bye-bye.
Goodbye. Now, don't you go away because I have a few more things to discuss with you on the
Okay.
idea of. One moment, we'll make sure. Are you able to leave? Did you see the
I'm
leave
sorry,
button?
what?
Maybe a leave button up at the top up there.
Let me get my glasses on.
There we go.
I
Wendy
see.
is going to go off
I
and
see the
pursue
leave
the
button.
rest of her book.
Okay, I'm sorry, what?
Oh, I just was telling everybody you're going to go off and pursue the rest of your book.
That's right. And I found the leave button. Thank you.
You're
Bye-bye,
welcome.
Wendy.
Have a wonderful day. So now that you've just found out what it means to live independently, I've talked about a little bit about considering the idea of having your own home in a tiny home, something that you can manage both financially and manage to keep clean in the way you want it without having to have a roommate come in because it's just your size. But that doesn't mean you're out in the middle of the pasture all by yourself. Communities are a great way, and they're popping up all over the country where tiny home living is acceptable. And there are so many benefits to coming to a tiny home. That's one thing I really want to develop in the next couple of years is to have a community for you to come to. Whether you come to for a week to get away from family, you can do that. I will have a tiny home there that you could rent for a week just to try out and see if you are ready to live independently before you make the investment. I would have a park model there, or maybe a little bit smaller, that you could try out independent living, see if it's something. Try out community living, see if it's too many people or just the right amount of people. Because one thing that I found is that if you can come into a community which allows you to be near other people that are like minded and yet not have them in your home unless you invite them for a visit, of course. But you may find that that's just the right thing you need. One of the other things I like about tiny living in a community setting is that now you don't need to buy a lawnmower and garden tools and your own laundry facilities and all these other things that you might think that you need. Now it can go into a shared interest, and you can go to like an equipment library where you can go and borrow some of those items to take home to take care of your home instead of having to buy all of the different things that goes into taking care of a home. You can get into a community where they already have those items. Let's say you are tired of cooking dinner and there just so happens to be a potluck coming up. Well, now you're making one dish instead of a whole meal, and that can be a lot of fun. Maybe you just want to have a couple of friends to have a cup of coffee or tea with. Now you're not trying to call up on the phone and see who's available. They're right there in the community. So I think what you really may want to consider is, am I ready for a roommate? Do I have too many things that I'm very specific about that I don't want to have any conflict? Because conflict can be stressful. And we don't want that to happen to you. We want you to be able to feel like you can live in your home, go home, be able to just jump on the couch and relax if you want to, even if there's a sink full of dishes right after work. So, really consider whether or not you want a roommate. Now, you may be financially able to have your own place. You may be ready with your own animal to have your own place. But when it comes time to being lonely, that's a big consideration for you. That's where a community setting might be just the right answer for you. And if you stay tuned, I will give you information, or you can contact me on the AskMeBridgeBuilders.com to say, I'd like to learn more about this community, and then I can help you from there. But for now, I'd like to sign off and say thank you for coming. Thank you to Wendy for coming and helping you decide if you're ready to live on your own yet. And I really want to thank you because this is such a big step. Once you get a job and you have the income, where you live can really tell you what kind of a person you want to be. And I think that that's important. After that, we start to look at relationships, as Wendy and I were talking about. And we have a bunch of different people that I have lined up as guests that will talk about some of the different special relationships you can have with an ASPE spouse, an ASPE partner, an ASPE roommate, or an ASPE child, or a grandchild in one case. So I really hope you'll come back next week and see what we have planned. And I'm going to leave it as a secret for now, but I hope you'll come back. Thank you so much.